Welcome to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We believe that Jesus is needed and relevant for people in Vancouver today. The message of God's love and promise of wholeness was destined to be experienced within a faith community that worships, studies scripture, and prays together. We warmly welcome you to journey with us towards greater connection, purpose, and peace. We'll be sharing our recorded services and conversations with health and wellness experts. Enjoy.
Good morning. Good morning. It's been a while for me, and it's a privilege to honestly be with you this morning, to worship with you. Thank you so much for that praise band. I think, God was really working. Those songs just really worked perfectly with what God has placed in my heart this morning. This idea of coming back to what really matters. And sometimes we genuinely get caught up with things, and just to bring it back to simplicity and really focusing on the love that God has for us. I think it's a beautiful thing. I am privileged to be a teacher, and I'm privileged because it's such a challenge sometimes, because young people really just challenge what I say all day long. They're always questioning the things that I say, and sometimes I think I'm doing my best work, and I'm preaching something really powerful, and the students kind of look at me like, what are you talking about? Why does this really matter? And I'm really grateful for that opportunity, because it challenges me too. Because in reality, these last 2 years and a bit, I know I'm not the only one, have really been a struggle. With COVID and all that stuff. A lot of these things that once gave me this sense of affirmation and validity were kind of shaken up and taken away, and I found myself really questioning of what truly matters? Why do I really do the things that I do? And I really love what Pastor Rhoda has chosen for a theme this summer of lyrics and lamentations, because I love music. I come from a family where there was always music in the background. There was always Whitney Houston playing, or Lionel Richie, or Air Supply, or Michael Jackson. There was always music in my household. From what I can remember, my mom and my dad enrolled me and my brother into all music lessons, piano, singing, guitar. Usually we were skipping all of those because me and my brother loved to dance growing up. But we loved music. And I think music is such a powerful, powerful tool for good and for bad sometimes. But this morning I just want to share kind of the journey of music in my life and how it's really affected my view and perspective, and even my own testimony, my relationship with God. I don't know if we have the next slide here. There's this secular artist named Bruno Mars, and I love his music, and I love his voice. He's very talented. Yeah, some of the music is questionable, I'm sure, but there's this song called Treasure, and it goes together with the sermon that I have this morning. And the chorus goes, I'm not going to sing it. Treasure, that is what you are. You're my golden star. You know you can make my wish come true if you let me treasure you. Oh, I'm not. And it's this really catchy, upbeat, really engaging song, and I think it's just really cute. When I hear it, I just can't help but kind of move. It's an older song, but when they play it at weddings, I find myself dancing sometimes. It's really hard not to, because it's this song of celebration, of somebody who loves somebody so genuinely, and all he can express really is this person is a treasure to them. And I think it really ties in and works well with the scripture reading that I've chosen in Matthew chapter 13, 44. And before this, if you read Matthew chapter 13, Jesus is talking to his people, he's talking to his disciples, and he's talking about how one day there will be judgment, there will be fire, right? There's those who will practice lawlessness will be thrown into the fire, and the wheat will be removed from the tares. And it's this really heavy and true message that judgment will come, but he doesn't leave it at that. Right after that, he actually starts to express the attitude that we should have when it comes to looking forward to that moment. And he shares these two somewhat similar parables in Matthew chapter 13, 44 to 46. Verse 44, it says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a person found and hid. And for joy over it, they went and sold all they had to buy the field. And again, this parallel story, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who when they had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all they had and bought it. And I'm just going to kind of break down this verse, because I think there's a lot of things to unpack and learn from this. First of all, it says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure. And I was just kind of looking up on Google, like what scholars say what the kingdom of heaven really means. And there are a lot of explanations, but typically, just like in Luke 17, Jesus says that the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is within you. He's kind of talking about like this relationship, like this current process of how God works in our lives. And he says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure. Hence the song, Treasure, right, by Bruno Mars. And when a person comes across this treasure that is hidden in a field, and I just want to stop there, it says that a person comes and just randomly comes across this hidden treasure. And from that, I think there's a lesson to learn that, as a teacher and, I preach sometimes too, I have a tendency to get really caught up in like talking about the grace and the love of Jesus. Like I can really share these like deep analogies and I really get carried away, but sometimes I think I talk more about it and not show it enough. Because according to this parable, this individual came across, they encountered this treasure. Somebody didn't introduce them to it. Somebody didn't force them to go to church and experience it. They came across it. They experienced something. And it kind of just reminded, like just last month, I was shopping for a couch. And this is like the tedious stuff of life that I don't like to do. I was shopping for a couch and I was going to like 3 different bricks all across like Vancouver, just trying out these couches. Like, this one's nice, but the armrest is bad and all this stuff. And I just love to shop around. And I shopped around for days. And I was on my computer and I found this cheap, affordable, nice looking couch online. And I just splurged and I bought it. It came in the mail, we unpacked it, and it looked beautiful, just like the picture said. There were such good reviews about this couch. People said a lot of great things about it. So I unpacked it, I set it up, I had my TV set up, I sat on the couch, and it felt like I was sitting on like a hay bale. That crunchy cushion, like, ugh, it's gross, and I couldn't return it. And I learned that lesson of like, sometimes like we can hear what people say about it, but until we experience it. And Jesus is saying that the kingdom of heaven, the relationship with God, that he's talking about, this process is something for people to experience, right? To come into encounter and see for themselves. And sometimes we get caught up in talking about God's grace and his love, but we fail to show it sometimes. The second part of this verse here, it says that, and I think this is actually the most important part, that when this person comes across this treasure, it's in their joy that they sell everything for it. In their joy, just like Bruno Mars is singing, like, let me treasure you. It's like the celebration. It's not a slow jam. It's not a slow ballad where he's dragging the song on. It's a celebration song. And then my question is, and a question that I always ask myself is, when we talk about like this relationship with Jesus, is it something that we feel joy about? Do we give all things and sacrifice for it because of our joy, or is it out of fear? Is it out of guilt? Is it out of shame? I love my mom. She's, God bless her heart. When our family just started to come into the church, she comes from a background where there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of shame and guilt, right? And my mom got really creative when we were young. She always loved to be at church like first thing in the morning. I don't know why, right? She liked coming in when they open up the doors, like we're there. But every like Saturday morning, me and my brother are just like fighting just for another minute or two of sleep. And my mom would be very frustrated with that. And I remember one morning, she got up, she like put on the gospel music really loud, but we're just sleeping through it. And she finally was about to leave the door. And she's like, Mike, it's me and my brother. She's like, it's time to go to church, but you don't have to go, very sarcastically. She's like, just know that at church, God is there. So if God is at church, you know who's here. Implying like the devil. I remember me and my brother just get up, like cold sweat, like, we're going to church. And I think sometimes we do this. We use fear and guilt. It's easy. I feel that even as a teacher, and I can only imagine as a parent, that it's definitely easier sometimes to make people obey out of fear or shame or guilt. But what Jesus is trying to say is when it comes to the kingdom of God, even though this judgment time will come, it's not out of fear for that moment, but it's out of joy. And thirdly, in this verse, it says that out of joy, this individual gives all that he has, or all that she has, or all that they have, to purchase the entire field. Now, I don't really understand all that. I understand that maybe that if you purchase a field, then you own everything within it. But to me, it's just kind of like overkill, right? Like, why not just like look for how much the treasure is? Why not just take it and put it in your pocket and leave? Like, why do you have to kind of overly give everything to purchase this entire field. And I think there is a meaning to that, because I think what really happens, and I think this is human nature, is when we are unsure of what we are purchasing or investing in, we tend to bargain, right? I remember buying my very first car. My dad told me, don't bother with these expensive dealerships. Go to like the sketchiest, like shadiest dealership, right? And take out like a cash from the bank and be like, this is what I have to offer. Give me this car. And I remember watching my dad for days, like just trying to like bargain deals and stuff. So I did the same thing. I went to this dealership. I bargained. I said, this is how much money I'm going to give you. And he was really sketchy about it. He didn't want me to test drive the car. And we kind of worked out this deal finally, and I was bargaining. I was like, can you throw in this? Can you give me one of these? Can I have free oil changes? We finally got to an agreement, and I did this, and I bargained because I was unsure. Like, how do I even know this thing drives? How do I even know that it'll last the next 2-3 months? And that's how it is sometimes. Like, we are unsure of what we're purchasing or investing in. We tend to bargain. And I think maybe I'm the only one who's guilty of this, but we find ourselves bargaining with God. We find ourselves bargaining our time. I already spent, my whole Saturday at church. I'm good for the week, right? We find ourselves bargaining for our efforts. Like, I already went to, soup kitchen. I don't have to, do the cleaning bee, right? We find ourselves bargaining our money. Is it 10%, before or after taxes, we find ourselves bargaining because I think sometimes, and maybe I'm the only one who's guilty of this, we are unsure of what we're actually genuinely investing in. But when it came to finally selling that old piece of trash, because it actually wasn't working and it had many accidents on it, I went to a Volkswagen dealership and I was like, I just want to buy a brand new car. And I found myself bargaining with the dealer, and he kind of looked at me confused. He's like, I'm going to give you 6 years of warranty. Bumper to bumper. If anything goes wrong, we'll just give you a new one or we'll fix it for free. And I was like, all right, take my money. Take it all, right? I don't even care what the price point is because I know and I'm sure of what I'm investing in. And in this parable, Jesus says, when a person comes across the treasure, when he comes across this relationship with God, in their joy, they give whatever it costs. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a challenge for us. And finally, in verse 45 and 46, it says that the merchant didn't just give away blindly. It says the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who when they found one pearl at great price, went and sold all they had. And what's beautiful about that, and I think is very interesting about that, is that this merchant was a professional. They knew the value of different pearls. They spent their whole life seeking for it. Yet when they found this one, they're like, oh, this doesn't even compare to what I've had. That it was a conscious decision. And I know we always talk about following God blindly and having this blind faith, but Jesus is saying when it comes to the kingdom of heaven, when it comes to the relationship with God, you got to know what you're getting into. Be conscious about it. And Pastor Rhoda, just two Saturdays ago, I think she was sharing this beautiful message, and she ended off with this challenge that we should give and we should commit because of God's love for us, as we see in the stars. We should consciously give, right? And respond to that. And I think this parable, Jesus is emphasizing that you need to know what you're getting into. It's not necessarily just this blind thing that you jump into, because that doesn't really last. So these 4 things, that one, you come across it, you encounter it, you experience it. And because you experience it, out of your joy, you respond to it. And you're not bargaining for how much you give for it. You're willing to give it all because you understand the worth. And I think this is a beautiful message and a challenge for us to really ask ourselves, when it comes to our relationship with Jesus, is that how we view it? Is that how we see it? And I shared this message with some students, and I kind of close it off at that. This is my challenge for you. And of course, students always do, they kind of just gave me that face. You're like, why do I have to? Why should I? What about a relationship with Jesus actually gives me any kind of sense of joy? And I was like, oh, that's a good question, right? And I was on YouTube, and I know all of us have a tendency, we go on YouTube and we get kind of lost with YouTube, right? YouTube takes us to these strange and random places sometimes. First you're looking up cars, and all of a sudden you're watching a TED Talk, and all of a sudden you're thinking of buying a new home. It's crazy sometimes. But I was on YouTube and I came across this TED Talk. And there was this individual who was talking about, he was involved in a Harvard study of adult development. And he claimed that it was like possibly the longest consistent study. Over 80 years, they were studying 700 different adults. And the adults came from two specific groups. The first group was graduates from Harvard, individuals who were educated and somewhat wealthy and privileged in their lives. And the other half of the 700 were gathered from Boston's poorest neighborhoods, from disadvantaged families, some of them coming from homes that even have running water. And the study consisted of that every few years, people would do these medical exams on these 700 individuals. They would interview them, interview their families, they would even record their body language, and kind of just see that throughout their lives, the changes and the challenges that they would face. Some of them grew up to be doctors, some of them became teachers, some of them became lawyers, some of them factory workers. This individual said that one of them even became the president of the United States. And every 2 years, they were interviewed up until even now. I think there's like 15 or 19 of them that are still alive, like in their 90s, who are still being interviewed. And this is the longest study done on people. And the results of what they found is they were able to predict a person's overall happiness at the end of their lives based on one key factor. There was one thing in each of these individuals, no matter where they came from, no matter what job they held or whatever the case, that could predict their overall happiness, physical and mental health later on in their lives, bar incidents or accidents. And that one thing, if a person had it in their lives, could actually predict their happiness later on, was something very interesting to me. And it was whether they were vegetarian or not. I'm just kidding. That's not it. Or maybe some of us would like me to say that the people who went to church the most frequently, right, were the happiest in their lives, or the ones who made the most money, or the ones who had the beautiful car, or the ones who had the beautiful home, but this wasn't. And this is not some Christian study. This is done at Harvard. This individual says that over 80 years of studying these people, the most important and key factor to determine and predict somebody's happiness later on in life, does anybody want to take a guess? Sorry? Prayer? Not even prayer. The one thing that they could find and predict a person's happiness, health, mentally and physically, was if the person felt valued, if the person felt loved. And not even just by many people. It could just be one or two. It could be the grandchild visiting them at the hospital. If they felt at all valued or loved, they tended to be the most happiest and healthiest people at the end of their lives. These are not my words. This is what the Harvard studies show, the longest study ever done on people. And I found that very interesting. I wish I saw and I read that it was because, people who go to church or the people who come up and preach the most or the people who initiate the most baptisms are the happiest, but it's not. It's people who feel valued and loved. And maybe it sounds like I'm oversimplifying, and I know there's a danger in deconstructing things, but just as that song says, sometimes we've got to come back to what really matters. I think at the very heart of the gospel, and if you read just through the scriptures in the Bible and the Bible story, you see that time and time again, God constantly tries to convince people just how much he cares about them. Just how much he loves them. That when we think about Jesus as a man, inclusive of people, right? Spending time with people that you wouldn't think he would, performing miracles, and then being crucified, and yet being able to do all these things, never lifting a finger to hurt those who are persecuting him. Everything about his life, his death, and resurrection show one thing. It's that this character, that this God, and he says that if you know me, you know the Father, that this God loves us unconditionally. And I understand it, maybe it sounds too simple, but if you really look into humanity, the one thing that we yearn for the most is to be affirmed, right? To feel a sense of value, to be loved. Sometimes I laugh at my grade 9 students and the things they're willing to do to get affirmation, the things they're willing to post on TikTok just for likes, right? And you think when you get older, you're done with it, but it's not true. I realized just this past year that a lot of things that I think that I do that are good, I do for attention. I do because I still yearn for more affirmation from my mom. For the first year of my life, I finally sought therapy And right in the first 10 minutes of my conversation with them, they're like, "You're a people pleaser, aren't you? Maybe that's why you feel so like on purpose and invaluable right now." And I think it's like in the deepest parts and like maybe even the most childish parts of our hearts that we continue to desire to be liked, to be loved, to be affirmed, to feel value. And I think there's no coincidence that God's like main structure and main narrative through the scriptures is that he just couldn't leave humanity alone. That he couldn't just leave us in sin. When you see the life of Christ, you see that he just loves us so much, unconditionally. And if you think about it, even if nobody else cares about us, and even if the job doesn't work out, even if the money doesn't come rolling in, even if our families even turn their backs on us, that God says, "I am still here for you." That someone is still there who still loves us. When I was a teenager, I joined the choir at my church. And our choir director, she really focused on singing and understanding the meaning of lyrics. And I loved the songs that she would sing, and make us sing, sorry. And I loved practicing and reading the lyrics of these songs, and she really made us focus on that. But there was this one song that she made us sing. It was called "Hold Me Now" by Kirk Franklin. And I just had a problem with that song. Because I love the songs of deliverance, right? I love the songs of God never loses a battle, that God has a miraculous hand and he's involved in our lives. But there was this one song that just bothered me, and it was just really sad, and it was tough to sing, and it was called "Hold Me Now." And there's some lyrics that I'm just going to share with you in that song, and it says this. It says, "To every broken person that may hear this song, to every boy or girl that feels their smile is gone, I know exactly how it feels to lay in the bed at night and cry." And all the verses of the song just go on about how difficult life can be sometimes, and how tough and how alone we might feel. And near the end, the piano starts to pick up, all their voices, we split up into harmonies, and we start to sing this part very powerfully. And I remember my choir director, she'd always close her eyes, and she'd tear up sometimes at this part. And the phrase would go, "Don't you worry, God is faithful and he cares. About the tears you drop and the pain you feel, he's there. When you are weak, that's when he's strong, even though you don't know how. God can and he will hold you now." And we'd sing that, "God can and he will hold you now." And I remember singing that as a teenager and getting frustrated with the song, because I'm that's not really good enough, right? Where's the deliverance in this song? The person's struggling, and all you're going to tell me is God can and he will hold you now? How about God can and will pay your loans, right? How about God can and will make sure your heart's not broken? How about that? And this song was an emotional one for me because I didn't like it. I didn't like this idea that God would merely just hold us, that God would merely just be there for us, right? I wanted a little bit more. I'll share this one last story. I was working at camp. Anyone worked at camp? Or we have summer camps. I think BC Camp Hope. At this point, I was living in Manitoba. We have a summer camp for kids to come by, and I've been working there for 7, 8 years. And I was a veteran by then. I was studying in my 4th year of theology to be a pastor. And the very last week of the summer, they brought in these adventure camp kids. Adventure camp kids are ages 4, 5, 6. In my opinion, they should not be left alone at summer camp at 4, 5, 6. But it's really just a glorified babysitting moment. And because I was a veteran, the director said, "All right, we'll give you the youngest, most challenging kids." I said, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that." Right? So I had 6 or 7 of these little boys in my cabin, and we had to make sure they brushed their teeth, ate their food, showered, went to all their activities, went to bed before sunset. It's a struggle. Thinking back, I don't even know how I got through 7 years of that. But this very last week, I was very confident, because I'm a veteran at this, and we have these young kids coming over, and I have the most challenging. If I'm successful at the end of this week, that says a lot about me as a camp leader, right? So I remember we had these kids, and at the end of the week, I was involved in this skit. It was me and a friend. And in that skit, there's these 2 gentlemen who are hanging off the side of a cliff. And it's all foggy underneath, and they can't see where it's going. And all of a sudden, this voice from heaven says, "Have faith in me, cut the rope." I don't know, camp, right? And we kind of have this battle and this exchange of conversations, like, how do we know? Is that God speaking to us? Eventually, we cut the rope and we find out we're only like 3 feet above the ground. And it's like, wow, God is real. After that, each cabin leader would get their kids and they would get back in their cabin and have a little devotional thought, sing some songs. And then we had these little cards, right? And these are like decision cards. And they're little kids, so they would just check off like their decision for God in their life. One of the options was, I accept Jesus as my Savior. One of them was, I want to learn more about Jesus in my life. But the third one, the golden one, was, I want to get baptized. And it's like this hidden, challenge or competition among cabin leaders. It's like, you want most of those third checks. Means you did a good job. So I was like, you know what? 4th year theology, I've been doing this for a while. I'm going to bring this card to the morning meeting and show that I was successful this week. And instead of just, doing the classic bringing my kids to the cabin, I thought I might make it a special evening. I actually got a campfire set up across the field. I had marshmallows and chocolates and s'mores. I brought my guitar. I told the kids, meet me at the fire. We're going to sing some songs. I'm going to treat you guys, and then decision cards, right? So I grabbed my guitar, and as I was making my way down the field, I saw what no cabin leader wants to see. There was 2 kids in the fire pit with their sticks on fire, poking each other. I saw 2 other kids running into the woods, right? This other kid jumped over this fence into the horse corral. And I was like, man, this is falling apart. So I was calling them together and they weren't listening to me. So I finally raised my voice and said, all you guys sit down on this bench. I made them line up and sit on this bench. I was like, you guys ruined your chance. No marshmallows, no chocolate, none of this stuff. We're going to talk and you're going to sign these decision cards, right? So they were sitting and these poor little kids, they're just looking at me. And I asked them the question. I was like, what did you learn from this week? And, we had some, kids who were raised in, these Christian families, and they were like, we learned that God works miracles, that he can save us. I was like, good answer, very good. We had one kid who didn't come from a family who believed in God, and he was just kind of laughing, and he's like, I think this is all a joke. There was another boy, he was Korean. He came from a conservative family like mine. He kind of, looked at him and said, don't say that kind of stuff. That's what Satan says, So they kind of started getting heated, and there was this little boy. His name was Aiden. He was 4 or 5 years old, and he had this tendency, he loved putting grass in his sweater. I don't know, and he loved just throwing grass around. And he had this little lion teddy bear, and he was sitting in front of me, and he asked me, he's like, Mark, you said all week long, and even in your skit, that when we pray, God can rescue you. I was like, absolutely. And basically, he was like, if God is really real, if I throw this grass in the air, can he send an angel to catch it? And I was like, well, I started getting into the theology of it, right? Technically, and then one of the other kids were like, well, you said, Mark, that if you ask and we pray that God can do these things. And I was like, well, I guess he can. That one boy who comes from a non-Christian home was like, God doesn't do that. I remember him saying this. He's like, God is lazy. He doesn't do anything. And that Korean boy is like, he said something, he's like, you are Satan's soldier or something. You can't be saying that. And they started to get into this little argument. And in my mind, I'm thinking God, you can, why don't you? Why can't you catch some grass, So that little boy, he's sitting and he has this grass in his hand. He's like, God, if you are real, and if you are true, and if you love us, please catch this grass. He throws it up in the air, all these kids, wide-eyed, mouth dropped. My eyes are wide, and my mouth is dropped. I'm like, God, are you going to do it? And the grass goes at the peak of its height. It pauses, and it just falls on his head, right? Now that one kid, he's laughing. He's like, ha, ha, ha. See, I told you. God is lazy. And he says, but I know the devil can do it. And I was like, okay, stop. That's not what's happening tonight. And the other kids are kind of confused. And that one, that Korean boy, he's like, how come God doesn't do that? And all of a sudden, it's getting a little heated. And that one boy, Aiden, he's like, we need to try again. He takes more grass. He's like, God, if you are real, show us today that you're, he's 5 years old. He's like, God, if you are real, show us. And he throws the grass up in the air. It reaches its peak. And I said, God, Like you wrote commandments on stone, right? You spoke the winds and the waves into obedience. Like, you gotta catch some grass for me today, please, right? Grass hits the pinnacle of the height and it falls on their head. Now things are going crazy, right? Now that other boy grabs some grass, like, let me show you who can catch the grass. I grab his arm like, not today, right? The other boys are questioning. That one Korean boy's looking at me now. He's like, hold on. Like, what's really going on? One more time, Aiden grabs some grass. He holds it in his hand. He's like, God, like, if you love me, man, right? Please catch the grass. Tosses the grass up in the air. All time stands still. All my 4 years of theology, like, it's all coming back to me now. And I'm thinking, like, God, if you don't catch this grass, I don't know where I'm at with you, right? Grass is up in the air. A little breeze passes by, and the grass falls back in the ground. At that point, the kids go crazy. One of the boys jumps right back into the horse bar, and the other ones go into the woods. I put the fire out. I said, okay, let's wrap it up. We're going to sleep. No decision cards today. And I remember, like, I put the boys to bed, and maybe 2, 3 a.m. at night, I leave the cabin, and I can't sleep, and I'm just, like, asking God, like, look, I get it. I get, like, there are rules to this, but why couldn't you catch it? Why couldn't you do it? And my whole life is just like going in circles, and I'm thinking about what I stand for and if I really, really believe in this thing. And I just remember in this still, like, small voice in my heart, it says, I am here with you. Is this not enough? And I wish I could tell you that, God sent, like, the strongest angel, like Gabriel, came and caught the grass, right? I wish I could say that. And for years and years and years of my life, like, I was just dissatisfied with this story and almost embarrassed to, like, preach and talk about it and say it and tell it. But for some reason, just in these last few years, and the stuff that we've all been going through, and even me personally, just how difficult this year was for me, for some reason, as I was reading the lyrics to this song, that God can and still hold you now, as I was thinking about that situation at camp years before, all of a sudden, I just felt like this was the most important thing. That as much as we want God to, like, do these things and perform these miracles and stuff, that what if, like, the most valuable thing in humanity, like the deepest, like, childish, most parts of our heart that yearns for affirmation and love, maybe that's exactly what God was trying to show us. That maybe perhaps, like, that is enough for us. That everything that Jesus had done in his life, death, and resurrection just shows how much he values us. And if it's really true, what this Harvard study says, that the happiest people are those who are loved, isn't that, like, real good news? That there is a God that loves us even if nobody else does. There's this song by Adele. I don't know if anybody knows Adele. And the song is called Make You Feel My Love. And as the praise band comes up and gets ready, I just want to share with you some of the lyrics to the song. It says, I know you haven't made your mind up yet, but I will never do you wrong. I've known it from the moment that we met, no doubt in my mind where you belong. I'd go hungry, I'd go black and blue, I'd go crawling down the avenue. No, there's nothing that I wouldn't do to make you feel my love. And I understand that this is a very romantic song, but I just can't help but see that it really echoes what Romans 5:8 says. And that God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, while we were still unsure, while our expectations were, like, here, when God's promises were over here, in those moments, God, while we were still sinners, that's when he pulled out all the stops to show how much he loves us. And I just challenge us to bring it back to that. Bring it back to the basics. Bring it back to the heart of what really matters. That God did everything he could to show us just how much he loves us because he was concerned about those deep desires for love and value in our hearts. And I think as we sing and we praise, we can do that with this attitude of joy. This joy in knowing that despite what happens in our lives, despite the trials, despite if church closed down again for the 50th time, there is a God whose love cannot be removed. There is nothing that can separate his love from us. That we can have that joy knowing that God can, and he still, and he forever will hold us now. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Learn more at oacvancouver.ca. If you're in Vancouver, join us for worship Saturdays at 11 a.m. at 5350 Bailey Street. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. God bless you and have a wonderful day.